Elvis Presley's granddaughter, Riley Keough, is opening up about her plans for Graceland and a promise to her mother.
For decades, Graceland has stood as both a museum and a shrine, a monument to the king of rock and roll. Millions of fans have walked through its doors, peered into its rooms, and felt as if they were stepping into Elvis Presley's life. But there has always been one place off limits, one floor sealed shut, left frozen in time since the day Elvis died. The upstairs of Graceland has been the most enduring mystery in rock history. Now, after nearly half a century of silence, Elvis's granddaughter, Riley Keough, has finally broken her silence. And what she revealed about that upstairs sanctuary has stunned fans around the world. Because for years, the Presley family maintained that no one, not even the most powerful celebrities, not even the closest friends, would ever see those rooms again. They were sacred, locked away, a place where Elvis lived his final days and where he ultimately drew his last breath. But Riley's words have pierced the veil of secrecy. For the first time, someone who not only owns Graceland but also carries Elvis's bloodline has spoken openly about what really lies beyond the rope at the top of the staircase. And in doing so, she has changed the way we understand not just Graceland, but Elvis himself. The shock of her confession is not simply that she talked about the upstairs, it's that she dared to humanize it. For decades, fans imagined that space as something larger than life, like Elvis himself. Rooms glowing with myth, untouched by time, guarded by mystery. But Riley described it as something far more intimate, far more haunting. She revealed that the upstairs of Graceland isn't a museum at all. It's a tomb of memories, a place where the clock stopped on August 16, 1977, and never started again. For the millions who have stood at the bottom of the Graceland staircase, wondering what lay beyond, Riley's words were like lightning. The king's bedroom, his private office, even the bathroom where he died. These spaces have been preserved exactly as he left them. Drawers still filled, records still stacked, even the smallest details untouched. It is not a polished exhibit designed for tourists. It is a frozen fragment of Elvis's life, sealed away for nearly 5 decades. And Riley made it clear. The decision to keep it that way is not just about family pride, it's about protecting Elvis from the gaze of the world one final time. For a man whose life was lived under blinding spotlights, whose fame consumed every corner of his existence, the upstairs of Graceland is the only space that remains private. In her voice, fans heard not just reverence but responsibility. She has inherited more than a house. She has inherited a secret. The weight of that secret is what makes her revelation so powerful. Riley didn't sensationalize it. She didn't describe every object in detail. Instead, she spoke about the feeling, the silence in those rooms, the overwhelming sense of presence, the way it feels less like walking through history and more like stepping into a moment that never ended. And in that honesty, she gave fans something far more shocking than photographs ever could. She gave them the truth of what it means to carry Elvis's legacy behind closed doors. The fan reaction was instant. Some were heartbroken, realizing for the first time just how frozen in grief the upstairs has remained. Others felt a renewed reverence, a deeper respect for the Presley family's choice to guard it, but no one could deny the impact. Riley Keough had finally given voice to the silence that haunted Graceland for decades, and that is why her confession matters. Because it doesn't just tell us about locked doors and untouched rooms, it tells us about a granddaughter who never knew her grandfather in life, yet who carries the burden of protecting his most private sanctuary. It tells us that upstairs Graceland is not just about curiosity, it's about memory, grief, and legacy. But Riley's revelation raises questions that go beyond Graceland's walls. If she has finally broken her silence, what else might she reveal about Elvis's hidden life? How much longer can the upstairs remain sealed? And will the world ever be ready to see what the Presley family has guarded for nearly half a century? Because Riley Keough's words have done more than shock fans. They have opened a door, one that cannot easily be closed again. To understand why Riley Keough's words hit so hard, you have to step back into the moment Elvis Presley died. It was August 16, 1977, and the world lost not just a singer, but a cultural giant. In the hours and days that followed, Graceland transformed from a private home into something else entirely. a shrine, a place of pilgrimage, a symbol of America's obsession with its fallen king. But in that transformation, one part of the house was sealed away forever: the upstairs. Priscilla Presley made the decision almost immediately. Elvis's father, Vernon, had been devastated by the loss, and the family agreed that certain parts of Graceland should never be disturbed. They knew the upstairs was Elvis's most private world, the space where he lived outside the glare of cameras, where he found refuge from the suffocating demands of fame. It was in those rooms that Elvis laughed with friends, played music into the early hours of the morning, and battled the struggles that eventually consumed him. And it was in those rooms, behind that closed door, that he took his last breath. So the family locked it. Not temporarily, permanently. They vowed that no tourist, no reporter, no curious eye would ever step inside. When Graceland opened to the public in 1982, fans were allowed to wander through nearly every part of the mansion: the living room, the kitchen, even the iconic jungle room. But when they reached the grand staircase, velvet ropes and quiet security made it clear: upstairs was forbidden. And that decision only fueled the mystery. Over the years, millions of visitors have craned their necks at the base of the staircase, wondering what lies beyond. Rumors spread. Some claimed the upstairs was untouched, frozen exactly as it was in 1977. Others speculated that it had been stripped bare or renovated in secret. Stories circulated about closets full of Elvis's stage costumes, shelves stacked with old records, and the infamous bathroom where his final moments took place. The secrecy only deepened the fascination. Writers described the upstairs as the holy grail of Elvis history, something no fan could ever access, a place that lived more in imagination than in fact. Some said leaving it untouched was a sign of respect. Others saw it as morbid, a refusal to move forward. But everyone agreed on one thing: the upstairs of Graceland was the most mysterious space in rock and roll. And for the Presley family, the decision carried both symbolic and emotional weight. Elvis had spent his entire life giving himself to the world. His concerts, his movies, his home, every corner of his existence was shared, consumed, and scrutinized. The upstairs became the last place untouched by public hands. It was more than just a floor. It was a sanctuary, a final boundary that separated Elvis the legend from Elvis the man. Riley Keough grew up under the shadow of that decision. As Elvis's granddaughter, she inherited not just the estate, but the responsibility to protect it. For her, the upstairs wasn't just a mystery, it was family history. A place she knew about, but also a place she had to guard. And that is why her recent words carry such weight. When Riley speaks of the upstairs, she's not talking about an exhibit or a tourist attraction. She's talking about the beating heart of Graceland, the one part of Elvis's life that remains private, sacred, and intact. It's important to remember how long the secrecy has lasted. Nearly half a century has passed since Elvis died, and in all that time, the door at the top of the stairs has remained shut. Generations of fans have come and gone, documentaries have been made, countless biographies written, and still no one outside the family and a handful of trusted staff has seen inside. That kind of silence is rare in a world obsessed with exposure. It has turned the upstairs into something larger than itself, a living myth hidden in plain sight. And now, Riley has pulled back that curtain just enough to remind us what it really means. The upstairs is not some dusty relic or locked treasure chest waiting to be opened. It is a time capsule, a place where Elvis Presley is not the king, not the myth, but simply a man who lived, loved, and struggled within those walls. But Riley's confession did more than feed curiosity. It raised a haunting question. If the upstairs of Graceland is the final untouched part of Elvis's life, how long can it remain closed? Should it stay sealed forever, honoring his privacy even in death? Or will there come a day when the world demands to see what lies at the top of that staircase? Because once Riley spoke, the mystery didn't fade. It grew, and it set the stage for her most powerful revelation yet, her own confession about what it feels like to carry that legacy and what she has seen behind the door the world has never been allowed to pass. For Riley Keough, Graceland is more than an estate. It is a living paradox, a place where the entire world comes to worship Elvis Presley, yet also the place where she is constantly reminded of a grandfather she never had the chance to know. Growing up, Elvis wasn't just the king of rock and roll, he was a shadow that loomed over every chapter of her life. And at the center of that shadow was one secret that set Graceland apart from every other celebrity home: the sealed upstairs. When Riley finally spoke about it, fans braced themselves. For nearly 50 years, speculation had filled the silence. Would she reveal the upstairs as a shrine perfectly preserved? Would she admit that it was nothing more than a locked wing of an old house? Her words did something far more powerful. They turned myth into something achingly human. Riley described the upstairs not in terms of objects or artifacts, but in terms of atmosphere. She spoke of the silence that fills those rooms, the way the air seems heavier, as though time itself refused to move forward after August 16, 1977. She admitted that stepping into her grandfather's private world is like crossing into a space where history has stopped, where Elvis Presley is no longer a legend, but simply a man who lived his final days surrounded by the ordinary details of his life. According to Riley, Elvis's belongings are still there. His records, his clothes, the small pieces of daily living that never had the chance to be packed away. Nothing has been staged for visitors or curated for display. It remains as it was, untouched by outsiders, a kind of frozen diary written not in words but in the objects he left behind. For Riley, that space is not a tourist attraction. It is a reminder of loss, of legacy, and of the burden she now carries as both Elvis's granddaughter and the custodian of his most private sanctuary. What stunned fans most was her candor. Riley admitted that entering those rooms is overwhelming. It is not a comfortable nostalgia. It is grief, a grief she inherited rather than experienced firsthand. She was born 10 years after Elvis's death, yet in those rooms she feels him closer than anywhere else. She spoke of how his presence lingers, not as a ghost, but as a weight, a reminder that fame may have made him immortal to the world. But upstairs at Graceland, he remains heartbreakingly mortal. Her confession didn't stop there. Riley revealed the conflict that comes with protecting those rooms. She knows the world is hungry to see them, to photograph every corner, to turn the upstairs into the final chapter of the Elvis Museum. But she also knows what that would mean: exposing the last private part of a man who gave everything to the public. For Riley, the upstairs is not about secrecy, it's about dignity. It's about giving Elvis, even in death, the privacy he was denied in life. And yet, she admitted the responsibility is heavy. As the heir to Graceland, the decision ultimately rests with her. Will she keep the rooms sealed forever? Or will there come a time when she feels compelled to open them? Riley confessed that the pressure weighs on her, that she feels torn between honoring her grandfather's memory and responding to the demands of a world that still craves more of him. Fans responded to her words with shock, reverence, and debate. Some praised her loyalty, saying she has done what no one else could: protect Elvis's humanity. Others argued that history deserves to be seen, that the upstairs should eventually be revealed as part of the Presley story. But no matter where people stood, one thing was clear: Riley's confession had reignited the mystery of Graceland like never before. In that confession, Riley Keough revealed something greater than the condition of a few rooms. She revealed the emotional cost of being Elvis Presley's granddaughter. She revealed the burden of carrying a legend's legacy on her shoulders, of balancing the man she never met with the myth the world refuses to let go of. And in her words, she gave fans a glimpse not just into Graceland, but into herself. But Riley's confession also created a new dilemma, one that stretches beyond her personal grief. Because if the upstairs of Graceland truly is Elvis's final sanctuary, then the question that now hangs heavy over his legacy is this: should it remain sealed forever, or is the world destined to one day climb those stairs? Riley Keough's confession about the upstairs of Graceland did more than answer old questions. It sparked a debate that has shaken fans, historians, and even Presley family loyalists. Because the upstairs of Graceland is no longer just a part of the house, it has become the final battleground over Elvis Presley's legacy. On one side are those who believe the upstairs should remain sealed forever. They argue that Elvis gave the world everything: his voice, his image, his home, even his vulnerabilities. What he kept for himself, the upstairs of Graceland, should be respected as sacred ground. To open it now, they say, would not be an act of preservation, but of violation. It would turn his most private sanctuary into spectacle, stripping away the dignity Riley has fought so hard to protect. On the other side are those who argue that history belongs to the world. They believe the upstairs is the missing chapter in Elvis's story, the final piece of understanding who he really was in his last years. They insist that fans deserve to see the truth, that the objects and spaces hidden away are not just family heirlooms, but cultural treasures. In their eyes, sealing it off forever is not loyalty, but denial. Denying the world a complete picture of the man behind the myth. Caught in the middle is Riley Keough, heir not just to Graceland, but to the Presley name itself. She has inherited a burden unlike any other. For her, the debate is not abstract. It is deeply personal. Every decision she makes about Graceland will be judged by millions. And yet she is not simply a steward of a museum, she is Elvis Presley's granddaughter. She is a woman carrying the responsibility of balancing history with humanity, myth with memory, profit with privacy. Riley has hinted that, for now, the upstairs will remain sealed. She has spoken of the weight of those rooms, of how they are less about curiosity and more about grief. To her, preserving the upstairs as it is means preserving the last untouched piece of Elvis's life. It means keeping one part of him for the family, away from the cameras, away from the endless appetite of fame. And in that decision, she has drawn a line, one that honors Elvis not as a legend, but as a man. But the pressure will not fade. Graceland is more than a family estate, it is a global business. Millions of visitors pass through each year, and the demand for access to the upstairs grows louder with every decade. As time moves forward, new generations of fans may push harder, believing the preservation of Elvis's memory requires transparency. And Riley knows that at some point, the decision may not rest solely on sentiment, it may rest on survival, on the ability to keep Graceland thriving in a world that always wants more. That tension between preservation and exposure is what makes this debate so powerful. Because it's not just about upstairs Graceland, it's about how we treat the legacies of icons. Do we consume every piece of them until there's nothing left unseen, or do we leave a corner untouched, a sacred mystery that belongs only to the family and to history? For fans, Riley's words were both comforting and unsettling. Comforting because she confirmed that Elvis's private world remains intact, untouched, a time capsule of his final days. Unsettling because she reminded them that some doors may never open, and in that reality, the myth of Graceland only grows stronger. Perhaps that is the truest legacy of the upstairs. It is not just four walls and a locked door. It is the line between Elvis Presley, the legend, and Elvis Presley, the man. It is the reminder that even the most public figures deserve a private space. And it is proof that sometimes what we don't see tells us more than what we do. Riley Keough has stepped into her role not just as custodian of Graceland, but as guardian of Elvis's dignity. Her confession has reignited the fascination, but it has also forced the world to face an uncomfortable truth. Maybe some mysteries are not meant to be solved. Maybe the upstairs of Graceland should remain what it has always been, the last sanctuary of a man who gave the world everything and asked only for one part of his life to remain his own. And so the debate rages on. Should those rooms stay sealed forever, or should the world eventually see them? No matter the answer, one thing is certain. Riley's voice has changed the conversation forever. For the first time in decades, Elvis's upstairs world doesn't feel like a silent rumor. It feels alive, looming over his legacy, daring us to ask where myth ends and memory begins. So what do you think? Should the upstairs of Graceland remain sealed as Elvis's final sanctuary, or should it be opened one day for the world to see? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories behind the Presley family legacy.